welcome everyone here. What a fantastic tasting. We have an unprecedented 500 registrants. We're at the Zoom limit across the world coming in, mostly United States, but there's some hardy souls in Australia and so forth who are curious about what potentially might be the world's best Pinot Noir. I hope there are no Burgundians in the audience, but this is such a treat for me. I actually opened the 3 bottles that we're going to go through last night, and I've been savoring them a little bit like a kid in a candy shop. You all know, and let me share my screen before I introduce our speakers. You all know about Sonoma. Let me share my desktop here. Oh, there's my music. Lizzo, by the way, that was Juice by Lizzo. But if you go just at the map here, Northern California, North Coast wine region. Let me see if I can increase that. And here we have, of course, Napa, and then west of Napa. What's so great about this group is it kind of varies from casual enthusiasts to serious deep dark Pinophiles. So for those of you who are the deep dark Pinophiles, excuse this introduction, but for those who are casual drinkers, so we have Northern California, about 70 miles north of San Francisco. We have Sonoma County, and the beautiful, well-heeled Healdsburg and Santa Rosa, where Charles Schulz, his museum is. And then in the middle of all this, you have not too far from the Pacific Ocean, you have the famed Russian River Valley. And Russian River Valley arguably is America's Grand Cru. It's the best of the best. Maybe it's the fog, maybe it's the soil, maybe it's the talent of the kind we have here tonight that we're going to grill and find out all the great information about why the Pinot Noir is so special and what they do to make it special, and how diverse just that relatively limited area of Russian River Valley is. How there are actually now subdivisions or what they call neighborhoods, and it's based on scientific evidence that each neighborhood now has its own kind of signature taste and aromas. But we'll get into that in a second. But before that, I want to introduce the 3 winemakers we have, and not just winemakers, principals. And speaking of principal, we have one of the partners of Benovia, Mike Sullivan. So hello, Mike.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Is that's the barrel room of Benovia?
One of our barrel rooms here at Benovia.
Cool.
Thought we'd sit here amongst the wines and just breathe in the love.
In context, and what I'd expect of a 5th generation Californian, local Russian River boy. I mean that in the most admiring way. North Bay Business Journal's Winemaker of the Year. North Bay, that's like all of Napa and Sonoma, so that's pretty incredible. And you are Mr. Benovia, aside from the great chairman and founders, Joe and Mary. So you are an amazing team. And your enology degree is from Fresno State. My former business partner is a Fresno, and I know how seriously and how prestigious the Fresno State enology program is.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Great to be here. This is really exciting.
Great to have you. And that's our Benovia partner and chief winemaker and chief everything. Okay, then we have Theresa Heredia, from Gary Farrell, and Theresa, again, we have a chief winemaker. She's been named winemaker of the year nominated by Wine Enthusiast. I think it was the San Francisco Chronicle that said she's one of the great winemakers to watch. She was previously at a Phelps operation, Phelps Freestone Vineyards. So hello, Theresa.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, and we have lots of good questions for you, including possibly we're going to get to the new kind of cork you're using, but we'll get into that.
Awesome.
And then finally, William Selyem, the Vice President of Winemaking, originally from Washington State, a food-obsessed gentleman who pivoted from research science to getting a degree in enology. So for those of us out there who are contemplating a career change, you were very inspirational, Jeff Mangahas. So welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you, Mark, and with Mike and Theresa. I don't have such accolades of being nominated winemaker of the year. That's just awesome.
Just the VP of winemaking, William Selyem.
Yeah, just one of the world's most coveted wineries, just the guy in charge of the product and everything else, and the growing of the product. Fantastic.
Yeah,
so, all right, guys, we're going to go through the wines, but I just want to remind people, these are small production, single vineyard, the three of them seem pretty casual. I think their French counterparts would have suits on, or at least would be playing very hard to get. But because you're Californians, you're very approachable. But don't let that fool you. These people are the very best of the best. Why don't we, for those of you who have the wines, and two were available, why don't we jump in? We'll use as at least the initial structure of this tasting. We will actually use the wines we're going to taste, and then I'm going to kind of ask some general questions that any of the three of you can answer. Any or all of the three of you can answer. But why don't we jump into? So these are all 2017s, and this Benovia, this is the Martaella. I think that's a fusion of the chairman's and the founder's two mothers' names. But Mike, why don't I give the stage to you and just tell us a little bit about this, and then let's try it.
Absolutely, Mark. So the Russian River Valley, which was founded in '83 as an ADA, sits in the heart of Sonoma County, and the Russian River Valley is about 120,000 acres of the 1.2 million acres in Sonoma County. And within we're sort of a concentric, bullseye here. This property would sit almost in the heart of the Russian River Valley in a neighborhood that we call the Santa Rosa Plains. And it's a really unique neighborhood in that it's a culmination of, to the west of us, we have marine sedimentary soils that are somewhere between 3 and 5 million years old along Laguna Ridge, and then out to the coast. To the east of us, along the Mangahas range, those tend to be volcanic in nature. So the Santa Rosa Plains neighborhood is a sedimentary soil that's formed from both of those soils, and tends to have a little bit more clay. This is a property that we planted. We have vines that were planted about 25 years ago, and vines that were planted about 11 years ago. And we've planted a number of clones here, mostly heritage and heirloom clones that make up this cuvee. We pick these grapes at night under lights to preserve the freshness and vibrancy of the fruit. We bring them into the winery. We'll cluster sort, destem, and berry sort. And what we want to capture is the essence of Russian River Valley. That cola, that the baking spices, the red and dark fruits, and we include about 20%.
Can I interject for 1 cent?
Sure, absolutely.
You mentioned. So I've done deep research on each of you, and in one tasting, so you mentioned cola, and then you also mentioned, is it sarsaparilla?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Oh, I think for me, it's one of the descriptors, one of the more savory descriptors of Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. Yeah. Sort of that cola or sarsaparilla, like sarsaparilla root, just that essence of, almost root beer-like quality.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for interrupting, but I love that term. And for those of you out there who want to seem like Russian River insiders, you got to say the sarsaparilla in a tasting. But anyway, go on, please. I interrupted you.
No, not at all. So this is the vineyard that sits around the winery. We farm about 42 acres here, and these vines are planted almost meter by meter spacing. We have some vines that are planted 1.1 by 1.1, so almost like in Burgundy. So we encourage small vines, really limited input in terms of water and fertilizer, and each plant's producing something like 2 to 3 pounds per vine. So lots of concentration. The wines tend to be there tends to be some opulence, there tends to be some richness.
There's power in this, I can tell already.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So unpack that. I mean, it's a perfect springboard, the opulence, the intensity. It's more opaque than the other two. What do you think? Like, tell us why this is happening in the wine.
For me, it's two factors. I think it's the nature of the soil. So we have more clay. This is more clay and clay loam soil. So with that comes power and intensity. Vines are planted on sand tend to have more lift and energy. Vines that are planted on clay tend to have more power. So this is a nice culmination of that power and intensity. And then we farm intensively to improve the concentration. So we do that through thinning, we do that through limited water through the course of the season, and of course by encouraging small vines. So I think all those things add up to a wine that has lift and intensity, but also power and ageability. So cheers.
Cheers. And it's beautiful. And let's springboard off of that term, ageability. And so Mike, you answer, and then Theresa or Jeff, you answer too. I'm curious. I forgot to actually get it out, but I've been drinking William Selyem's from the 90s. I was able to get some. It was a mixed lot case, so it wasn't too expensive, and it's been so much fun, and they've all been great. Yeah. So tell us about how long does Russian River Valley Pinot age, and what should we know about that?
Sure, that's a great question. So for me, as I'm making wine and I'm following them through the process, aging in barrel and then again in bottle, you can tell when a wine has a very slow evolution. I call it sort of a glacial pace. They move very slowly in the barrel. They still have lift and energy, and they really don't shed some of that baby fat until the wines are a few years in bottle. As far as the ageability of Pinot Noir, some of those early William Selyem wines and some of those Joseph Swan wines from the going back to the 70s and early 80s in the case of William Selyem, those wines have aged beautifully, and I would put them bottle per bottle up against some of the greatest Pinot Noirs in the world.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And anyone else want to talk about just how your wine ages or how in general Pinot ages?
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, obviously it starts with a great site, right? I mean, we're only talking about wines of this quality level, the historical Allen, Rocchioli vineyards that I get a chance to work with and Theresa works with as well. I mean, those great sites have everything sort of built in, right? They have, like Mike was talking about, the soil creates the texture, the architecture of the grape. And so you need to be able to have well-formed tannin structure with nice fruit concentration to be able to age. And all the wines that we're going to talk about today, and certainly in everybody's, Mike's wines and Theresa's wines, we're only interested in great sites, right? And so it's the confluence of, concentration, acid, tannin, and certainly winemaking choices that help encourage ageability. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, I think what's really cool about all of our wines really is that they can be enjoyable when they're young, but it's a question of, do you like older wines too? And I think I happen to love old wines. I think the four of us probably love older wines, and we gravitate towards producers or sites that can actually do that. So, yeah.
Oh, Theresa, just unmute yourself. Sorry. It's very polite of you to mute yourself.
The phone was ringing. I forgot I muted myself.
Oh.
So yeah, it's really important to talk about the acid and the tannin structure of the wines in terms of ageability. but also ripeness level. I think all three of us pick at slightly different ripeness levels, but we're all picking on the earlier end to capture, the beauty and the sense of place from each of the vineyards. Picking earlier allows the fruit to have more longevity. So in addition to the acid and the tannin, that's very important.
Did I read, Theresa, your style is to pick kind of on the extra early side, or is that kind of a Theresa signature, or?
Earlier side, not the extra early side. I definitely am earlier than several people, but I'm not the earliest, that's for sure. I know people who pick a lot sooner than I do. We're all on, it's a spectrum.
So interesting. That's a thing among winemakers. I remember visiting Burgundy, of course, the Pinot Noir template for many people, and all the winemakers were obsessed with exactly when they picked. And I think, unlike California, they would try to keep a secret, whereas I guess you guys are more collaborative.
We're all really collaborative. I mean, we all work together. Jeff and I make wines from Mike's vineyard, and Jeff and I both make Rocchioli and Hallberg. So, we're always texting each other and sharing data and picking each other's brains about picking decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
But plus, we're all old friends too, right? We happen to actually all like each other too.
Yes. So. We've known each other for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Mike, tell us a little bit about, is there anything else we should know about a wine like this? I mean, what would you pair this with? It's a more powerful, I love it. And I think it's like just hedonistic, and it gives you a lot of there, and yet there's a refined aspect to it. But what sorts of foods would you pair this with? And I'll also throw that to our other two wine professionals. What do you pair with a richer Pinot?
That's a great question, Mark. For me, this wine, which has some savory elements, I would pair maybe with a lamb loin chop if you were a meat eater, maybe with some herbs de Provence, something that brought out some of the more savory elements. But you could certainly do a grilled portobello on the grill. Even some washed rind cheeses would be a great match with this wine. So I think that there's some versatility here, but something with some fat to help cut through some of the tannin.
Last night we had lamb chops in a Pinot Noir reduction sauce. I think we're gonna have the leftovers and drink some of these wines.
Sounds perfect.
We'll all be over. We're gonna take a giant Greyhound bus and be there, tomorrow.
Got to make some more lamb chops.
What I like about this wine, Mike, is it has, just knowing the site pretty well, and visiting you and tasting a lot of your wines, even though there's powerful tannins to it, the tannins are very evenly structured, right? There's not a lot of, you can tell that it's not like a Sonoma Coast mountaintop vineyard where the tannin profiles are kind of up and down, if you know what I mean. It has a nice evenness to the tannin structure, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a mouth coating, there's a nice mid-palate weight to the wine. And I think the 17 vintage, there was some heat at the end of the vintage, so things ripened pretty quickly. We got a little more concentration that year. Some vintages like the 19 is really pretty in lip and not nearly as extracted.
That classic Russian River succulent fruit just balances the tannin so nicely, and the acidity as well.
Absolutely.
And when you say succulent fruit, for the casual drinkers, do you mean the acidity, or but you said the succulent fruit balances the acidity? So the fruit is more of the kind of blackberry, rhubarb thing going on. Is that?
Yeah, so it's just really juicy fruits. Really, so the thing that we have in the Russian River Valley that you can compare to other Pinot Noir regions, famous regions, let's say Oregon or Burgundy, we're in California, we have the sunshine, we have the intensity of sun and the richness of fruit and that succulent, juicy fruit quality with the really beautiful acid in the backbone. My mouth is watering just talking about it.
Oh my God. Well, since you're talking about it, let's jump to your wine, Theresa. And by the way, I want to dwell a little bit more on the specific neighborhoods. So maybe when you talk about your wine, you could talk about what neighborhood of the Russian River Valley it's from, and then maybe compare that neighborhood to the plains that Mike was talking about. Mike could chime in if there's anything we should know about that specific neighborhood. But tell us about this Hallberg Russian River Valley. Again, another 2017. Beautiful label, by the way.
Thank you. That's a new label, newish. It's we decided to go with the blue label to distinguish the single vineyard designates from the Russian River selections, which have the classic gold color label. So the Hallberg Vineyard is it's an incredible vineyard. It's located in the Green Valley neighborhood, the Green Valley of the Russian River Valley. And it just turns out that the Green Valley is an official, it's the only neighborhood of the Russian River Valley that's an official sub-AVA that was established the same year as the Russian River Valley in 1983. So this particular vineyard is an old apple orchard, and it is quintessential Green Valley expression. It's located in close proximity to the Pacific Ocean. You can see it's on that western flank of the Russian River Valley. The soil there is very classic, very powdery, fine, silty, sandy, Gold Ridge series soil. I have a little soil sample here. You can't really see it completely, but you can see that there's some sand here, right?
Pretty cool.
So to compare that, I have a sample here of Martaella, which is a little more clumpy, and there's more clay. You can see that it's a totally different composition. So in Green Valley, and at Hallberg in particular, the roots can penetrate through the sandy soil and reach the water table, and so the growers have the opportunity to dry farm. So Kirk Locke likes to dry farm. He doesn't like to irrigate unless he absolutely has to. And if he does in a really hot year like 2017, he's giving tiny, tiny little sips just to keep the vines happy and alive through the heat. Other than that, he's dry farming, and so it really helps to build these beautifully concentrated wines. When I say concentrated, I don't mean huge and concentrated and structured and robust. I just mean that the fruit has natural concentration. We as winemakers who receive this beautiful gift of Pinot Noir from Hallberg, we can treat the wine, as gently as we choose to, trying to capture a sense of place, an expression of terroir from that particular vineyard. So in addition to that sandy soil, being in close proximity to the ocean, it's also very foggy. So sometimes in a cooler season, the fog doesn't burn off at all during the day throughout the growing season. And so because the grapevines are sitting in fog for most of the day, they have this deep, dark expression of fruit. So it's more blueberry, blackberry, as opposed to cherry that you would get from, say, Rocchioli, for example. Now, 2017, being the hot vintage that it was, we ended up picking a large quantity of our grapes in a very short period of time. So what we ended up getting are these beautiful wines that have vibrant aromas and flavors, and really some of the wines more delicate on the palate, which this 2017 Hallberg is. It's one of our more delicate Hallbergs that we've ever produced. And I love it. It's one of my favorites. It has a little bit more of an old world style to it, but it still has that beautiful succulent fruit going, in terms of Russian River Valley.
Mike, Jeff, did you have anything to say about this wine or anything Theresa said?
It's got really beautiful laser-focused red fruits. Some nice savory notes, and the fine tannins and blueberry that you get from Green Valley is just lovely.
Mm-hmm. It's a mixture of all those components.
Yeah, beautiful perfume. I mean, it definitely, just even comparing the two wines that we just tasted, Mike's wine and now Theresa's wine, you can definitely tell there's a cooler fruit element to this wine compared to, even when we get to the William Selyem, which is in a warmer part of the Russian River Valley, maybe even a little bit warmer, drier than where Mike's vineyard is. So that's kind of cool to see, right? I mean, Green Valley is typically known to be one of the cooler parts of the Russian River because of, like what Theresa said, that fog intrusion. The fog kind of sits in this part of the Russian River Valley a little bit longer. So you have maybe less photosynthesis, more, less of the darker fruit character in a way, wouldn't you say?
Yep, absolutely. And so it's fun that Jeff and I can talk about these things together too, because we each make wines from these different locations. I like to use, maybe, you'll have to fact check me on this, you two, but I like to use a little bit more whole cluster in my fermentations, possibly, than the two of you.
explain what that is for the layperson, whole cluster. Like, make it simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So what it means is we literally have the grape harvesters pick the whole bunch. Well, they always pick the whole bunch for us. We pick everything hand harvested. So everything gets delivered to the winery in the whole bunch form. And you can either put the fruit through a destemmer using processes similar to what Mike was talking about. All the fruit gets hand sorted as a cluster. If you choose to put it through a destemmer, you're throwing away all the stems because you don't want to have herbaceous flavors in your wine. But if you choose to put the whole bunch in, you're getting a greater expression of terroir, a greater expression of the Hallberg Vineyard in this wine because you're including the stems. And in a cool climate, I find that you have a better chance of getting riper stems that harden off because they get more time, you get more extended hang time. The fruit and the stems ripen a little bit more on par with one another as compared to a hotter location where the fruit would ripen ahead of the stems. So it adds more structure, more tannin. It adds black tea flavors and spice, and it just adds more of everything. I always love a little bit of whole cluster.
Yeah, so it always kind of, to me, contributes a perfumey sort of quality, right?
Yeah.
A very lifted aromatic that, and arguably maybe even a spicy kind of note to a wine, you know, the profile. So
actually, Jeff, that's a great term you just used, lifted, because I actually, in my research on Theresa, she mentioned she loves to make wines that are lifted, and I thought I knew what that meant, but why don't, Theresa, define for us, or Jeff, but probably Theresa, because I read about you saying that's one of your signatures, or at least one of your preferences. What does lifted mean in Pinot Noir?
So for me, it just means that, so you have some wines that are really driven by the palate, right? You can smell, for me, the appreciation of a glass of Pinot Noir is half the aroma and half in the glass. Well, you have some wines that have more stuffing to them, and sometimes they hold on to their aromas a little bit more tightly until they get decanted or they're sitting in the glass. I like our wines have more lifted, more available, more jumping out of the glass, vibrant aromatics, is because we are picking a little bit earlier. Somebody asked the question about alcohol. Yes, Gary Farrell is often below 14% alcohol, not by a lot, but our Hallberg is 13.8. The Benovia is 14.5. It's really just a stylistic difference. And I find that the lower alcohol helps the fruit aromatics to express themselves immediately once you pour the wine. Whereas Benovia, it has all those beautiful aromatics as well. It's also got that great stuffing on the palate, that great concentration. And it's really about what mood you're in. The Benovia is a whole mood, as the kids would say.
I totally agree. I mean, people, it's so funny how you give anyone a little plot of land and people take sides. But for me, I love the most delicate Pinot Noir and I love the richest Pinot Noir. And it depends. It's all about the mood I'm in. Let me ask a general question to Theresa and then to everyone. Is a gentleman named Jeff asked me, I got the wines, should I decant them? And of course, a big hardy Cabernet Sauvignon we may decant, or an old wine that's thrown a lot of sediment we may decant. But what do you guys think about decanting Russian River Valley Pinot Noir?
I think that young wines, if you're drinking a wine that should have been aged for longer, as we Americans often do, it can't hurt to decant it just to help it, speed up its opening up process and help it show more of its lifted aromas. There we go again with the term lifted. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I personally don't decant a lot of wines, even, big Cabernets. For me, I'll use a big glass like this and just sort of watch the evolution. I mean, for me, part of wine is, it's hedonistic, it's enjoying the moment, but there's an intellectual, us as winemakers, there's the intellectual side of how a wine sort of develops. And so I like to kind of capture that throughout the evolution. Over the course of a meal, you open it up when you're cooking, and then a little bit while you're eating dinner, and then a little bit after, your meal, and you're kind of just observing what happens. And I think that's a fun evolution for a wine. So even with a young wine, I tend not to do that, but I see the point, because I think if you want to if you're pressed for time and you want to just enjoy that wine, yeah, and it's young, by all means, you know.
I would agree with Jeff. Making wine and enjoying wine is about patience. And, if you have the time to sit and taste your bottle of wine over the course of a 3-hour dinner, you're generally going to get the full sort of panoply of flavors and aromas. But
Right.
the last thing you want to do is, pop a bottle and not have it open over the course of the 3 hours, then expediting that by opening it in the morning or,
Or the day before.
Yeah, totally.
I open wines I don't decant either very often, but opening the day before is a great trick if you don't have a decanter.
That's such a great idea. I heard in Cahors, France, southwestern France, some of their Malbec, even though it's the Malbec grape, sometimes it's so harsh because it's not from Argentina, it's from France. They will say, do not drink this unless you've taken the dog out the day before, unless you've decanted it the day before, you've opened it and exposed it to oxygen.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and as winemakers, it's kind of, I'm sure we all have wines, buried deep in our cellars, and that's sort of fun, right? To be able to have, go into the wine cellar and be able to pick something out perfect that's got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, and you can find something just perfect for that moment. That's a good problem.
Dina Davis asked a question. When we pull the cork the day before, I leave the cork in it overnight. Otherwise, it would probably just get a little bit oxidized, and show some, off aromas and flavors. It would mature too quickly. So you just pull the cork; it pulls in plenty of oxygen to allow it to open up over the night's course.
Yeah.
Very good to know. And by the way, feel free to ask a quick question on chat, but if you want to ask like a more formal question, add it to the Q&A. People have also submitted questions in advance, so I'm going to move this along, but I love the idea of opening it because that's not known that much, opening it the day before. Is there anything else the three of you do to appreciate the finer nuances of Pinot Noir? Because one thing I always hear is, Mark, you can talk about cola in the wine, and I do smell it after years of practice, but is there something you can do? Like one thing I do sometimes, and it becomes contagious, is covering the glass with my hand to trap in the vapors. And I can, or tasting consecutively versus sequentially, going back and forth. But are there things, I know you guys are dealing with your different clones and your different blends, and you're smelling and tasting wines all the time. Is there something you guys do to help the elements pop more when you're comparing different wines?
Mark, the one thing that comes to mind for me is serving temperature. If you're serving your wine in Scottsdale, Arizona in August, it's different than serving your wine in Madison, Wisconsin in January out on the porch. So having the right serving temperature is important to allow the wine to evolve and coax its nuances out.
And what is the right serving temperature?
That's a good question, and subjective to all consumers. But cellar temperature, and then allow it to warm up over the course of a meal would be ideal.
Yeah.
So like 55 degrees, not to get persnickety about this.
58, 60, something like that, and then just allow it to warm up. Yeah.
Well, maybe even I would add to that, Mike, which is, really even a few degrees below room temperature is because your body is sort of accustomed to that. Whatever room temperature that is, the wine has to just be a few degrees cooler than that, would be what I would say. But
yeah. And then we're all winemakers here, so we're gross. We're disgusting. We slurp our wine. That's the trick. It's the trick, and it's gross. If you sit in a room and listen to us while we're like having a serious tasting, it's gross.
Can you show us, Theresa? Can you demonstrate?
Let's all demonstrate together. Come on,
all right, let's do it.
Okay, on three, we'll let you go first.
I always choke when I do it, so I don't do it that much.
We spit it out too, because otherwise we'd be trashed all day long.
Listen, during COVID, you're allowed, That's an okay thing. By the way, before we get to Jeff, I just want to show some bottles. So some of you know I teach, I've done 15 years at the Aspen Food and Wine Classic, and I teach like the ultimate wine seminar. And Benovia, not only, this was $80 a bottle or maybe even more. Beautiful Russian River Valley Benovia, but they bottled it in an 18-liter Melchior. That's what you've heard of Jeroboam or Magnum. No one even knows it's called Melchior because no one ever bottles an 18-liter except the great people of Benovia. And then to celebrate, I wish I had a Gary Farrell Magnum, hint, hint, or Jeroboam. Actually, all of these wines are relatively hard to find. They sell out very quickly, so it's hard to find the big bottles. But a friend of mine who's obsessed with William Selyem and whose dad's name is William, who signed the bottle, this is a 9-liter Russian River Valley, beautiful bottle. So when you really get bitten with enophilia, these become your living room decorations. So I just wanted to show that. But on that note, and William Selyem's note, Jeff, tell us about, let me hold up this bottle, Lewis MacGregor.
Yeah, so this is our 2017 Lewis MacGregor estate. It's a relatively new wine for us. We purchased the vineyard in 2014, but it was an existing vineyard, 20-year-old vines by the time we had purchased it, and it's on the map. It's in what's called the middle reach of the Russian River Valley. So it's north of both the Santa Rosa Plain and the Green Valley. And if you look at sort of where the fog sort of comes in, which is sort of, the southwest corner of Russian River and the Sebastopol Hills, that's where the fog kind of comes in. So sort of naturally the proximity of the middle reach, it's sort of the last place where the fog, intrudes. And kind of the opposite of that, it's usually the first place where the fog retreats. So it's typically known to be a warmer climate. It encompasses both sides of the Russian River. So the Russian River, from the town of Guerneville, it's heading from the Pacific. Guerneville, it's heading east, and then it takes a turn up, going up towards Healdsburg and Windsor and Healdsburg. And so it's a narrow band. It's actually a relatively small part of the Russian River Valley. But the soils are a little different, little rockier, river, kind of gravel, that kind of thing. Ribbons of clay with a little bit of, red volcanic soil as well. And typically it is because it's on hillsides, the soil tends to dry out a little quicker, coupled with the fact that it's a bit warmer of a microclimate. Typically, I farm a lot here in the Middle Reach, but also, I work with Mike and, vineyards like the Hallberg Vineyard, for example. Bud break always happens first in the Middle Reach. And so harvest always happens first in the Middle Reach. And this is definitely the case with this wine. I was looking at the harvest dates of all three of these wines. And I picked my wine in the Middle Reach, the MacGregor Vineyard, on the 11th of August, which pretty early. I'm usually, maybe along with Theresa and some places, we're usually probably the first two picking in the Russian River Valley, I would say. And this is definitely one of the early sites. This was my very first pick in 2017.
Wow. So Jeff, how would you describe it, and how would the other winemakers describe this?
Yeah, so here largely this wine the concentration is driven by the incredibly low yields. For whatever reason, this particular site tends not to set a very big crop. Older vines, concentrated. It's a rolling hillside, And there's a lot of gravel and stream gravel in this particular vineyard. So, palate-wise, the wine has incredible acidity to it. Because of the rolling hillsides, it tends to have a little bit more robust tannin profile as well. It's red fruited, but there's definitely a dark kind of core of black fruit in there. This particular wine, Theresa, and we were talking about, the whole cluster part. There's whole cluster in here too, but I tend to use a tiny little bit more than average. So this is probably about a third whole cluster in the fermentation as opposed to my normal like 25%. But yeah, the red fruit, the acid driven. I mean, talk about a wine that I feel like could age really well.
Yeah.
This would be it, right?
How long would you lay it down for?
My personal preference, is the 7 to 10 years. I think that amount of time for a William Selyem wine is not unheard of. Certainly with all the elements here, with the whole cluster, the rich tannins, the concentrated fruit. I mean, this would be a shoo-in for 10 years, in my opinion.
Easily.
But delicious today, if you wanted to enjoy it, I think.
But your William Selyem wines age for decades, right?
They do,
Easily.
yeah. I mean, some of, like you, Mark, I've had the opportunity to taste a lot of older William Selyem, and gosh, some of my favorite wines that I've had recently are early 90s wines that are still magnificent.
They're still great. Yeah.
They're gorgeous. Yeah.
By the way, if people in the audience don't know what bud break is, this is a picture that our viticulturist took from our Ritchie vineyard here, not very far from where the winery is located. But you can see the grapevine material literally just starting to burst out of the wood.
Actually, could you hold that up
Middle Reach,
for us, Theresa, again? I'm going to take a picture of it and put it on social media.
Okay.
Everyone do this because A, it's fun to show we were at this amazing epic tasting, but B, technology within technology.
Did you get it?
Everyone bemoans Zoom fatigue, and I understand, but you couldn't do this live as easily. So that's pretty cool.
Well, interestingly, that Ritchie vineyard is not far from this Lewis MacGregor vineyard. It's actually right around the corner. So. Yeah.
Oh, and I don't have a soil sample of this Lewis MacGregor vineyard, but this is from Rochioli, which is in the Middle Reach. So you can see it's similar. It's somewhere in between Green Valley and the Santa Rosa Plain. It's gravelly. It looks a little bit more like soil next to a river, because it is.
And what do we take from that, though? Like, is that about how deep the roots go? Or I'm not sure what, when I see, what's the takeaway, or is it just like a middle ground between the richer and the lighter style because of that soil? Or tell us.
Well, the soil type affects so many different things in the grapevine growing conditions. But to think about it being in between, I mean, it's got some sand, but it's more gravelly. The soil's not as deep as Hallberg, where the roots can penetrate a little bit more deeply in that fine sandy soil. And then I'll let Mike talk about the clay Huachica series soils in Martaella in the Santa Rosa Plain and what that does for the wines.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Jeff's talked to me a lot about this site, this Lewis MacGregor site. And, this is the meandering Russian River Valley that, over the course of millennia ebbs and flows. So there's worn river stones that sort of get left as the river transition. We find that in Middle Reach pretty predominantly because that's where the Russian River comes down and takes a bend. But it also happens in Santa Rosa Plains. So sedimentary nature of the river wash happens throughout the Russian River Valley in many areas.
Yeah, and that's the soil is only part of the story, right? It's the microclimate, the ebb and flow of the fog, and hillside, more sun different types of exposures, and so they all kind of work in concert to really define the wine. I don't think you can separate one particular. The soil is important because it has water holding capacity. It's got availability of nutrients for the roots, for the plants to survive, under certain conditions. So there are all these little subtleties, but they all come together to make the wine.
And the French have the term terroir. We don't have the same equivalent expression. I like to use the term site specificity. I think it means the same thing. That's how
Specificity.
Yeah, it's not a COVID-friendly term. You have to wear a mask, 2 masks when you say it.
I'm spitting out as I'm saying that.
I like that.
So, okay, I want to do an interlude. By the way, we've got some great questions, but I want to do an interlude, a power round, so these are short answer questions for the three of you. Why don't we start with Mike? We'll go Mike, Theresa, Jeff, and I'm going to give a question, and because, sometimes not enough comes out at these virtual tastings, so I want to amplify it. Okay, number one, what is the bottle or a bottle that hooked you on wine? Mike.
That's a great question. So I'm going to have two. One was the wine that I drank on my 21st birthday that my dad had stashed away, a 1969 River Mondavi Cabernet that was absolutely beautiful.
That's quite early for Mondavi. Didn't he start in the right
66 was the first vintage. 69 was a great vintage. And then the other one was, I started the wine industry when I was 18 years old working at Chateau St. Jean, and they had bottled Robert Young. They were the first California winery to bottle single vineyard Chardonnays, and they made a Robert Young Reserve, but they only made it in Magnum. So the 85 Robert Young Reserve Chardonnay from Chateau St. Jean was definitely an epiphany wine.
Theresa.
Wow. Mine was a 1995 Denis Morte Clos Vougeot. It was life-changing, and I had it in Burgundy too, so it was really a beautiful experience. And I'm gonna do a funny one because Mike did 2 wines. My other wine that's memorable in my life was a Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill that I was drinking out of the bottle while I was floating on Lake Havasu in college. So pretty life-changing as well.
And that shouldn't convince people that a winemaker like you references that. Listen, I grew up in New Jersey drinking strawberry wine coolers. So,
same thing.
Jeff.
Cool. I'm gonna do 2 wines too, because at different points in my life, when I was still in research science, one of my very first trips was to France, and eating, drinking, visiting places. And at the time, that sort of pushed me towards going into a career of winemaking. I had a Vogüé Muzzini, which just rocked my world. That was incredible.
One of the world's best Pinot Noirs.
And when I came back, that was the wine that changed my life in terms of, wow, I need to get into the wine business.
For the nerds out there, do you remember the vintage year?
It was a 93.
93.
Which was a pretty amazing wine.
We're all going to run to get it now.
And then, similarly, once I got into the business, it was a 1996 William Selyem Allen that opened my eyes to Russian River Pinot Noir. And here I am. I get to make the wine today, which is pretty incredible. So that was another very important wine in my life.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, next. What is one of the most unusual aromas you've smelled in a good Pinot Noir? Mike.
So Pinot Noir ebbs and flows in its evolution, especially when the wines are young. So I would say wet Labrador Retriever.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So
nice.
But it was a good wine?
Oh yeah. No, they can. Sometimes wines can smell like blue cheese or camembert. They can go through all kinds of really funky transitional phases. But wet dog is not a bad thing as long as it's not a lot of wet dog.
Well, I know Chenin Blanc is sometimes Bouvray from France. They will talk about wet dog sometimes. So. Excellent. Thank you, Theresa.
Yeah, not quite as unusual, but soy is something that you can get in a really, I've picked it up in older Burgundies. I've picked it up in our Rocchioli Pinot from 2015 in particular. So that's an interesting one.
That's so
yeah.
cool.
I mean, wine's kind of interesting, especially Pinot Noir, because it's so thinly veiled as far as, like aroma. So it shows a lot, right? And one of the more unique things that I've smelled in wine is like, how do I want to put this? Sort of earthy, barnyardy, sort of cow pie kind of smells. And it's interesting because wines that are near places or dairies or, whatever, pig farms, they pick up those smells. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of
It's site
the terroir.
specificity.
Yeah, the sites, but there you go. Thanks, Theresa.
Hold on, though, Jeff. I read that one of your favorite beers is pig something.
What is it? Blind Pig?
Blind
Blind
Pig,
Pig.
yeah.
Russian
So
River,
pig farm,
brewing, Blind Pig.
Blind Pig. Is it true great winemakers like yourselves also drink beer?
Oh yeah.
I drink a fair bit, but I've kind of graduated more towards whiskey as of late. But
Same. But you need a good palate cleansing beer after a day of harvest or a day of wine tasting, right? The little bubbles, the tiny bubbles.
Yeah.
Or champagne.
Or champagne.
Always champagne.
Mm-hmm.
Great justification. Okay, number 3. What is your one of your favorite $20 or under wines? Any variety, any producer, Mike.
So I would have to go with Spain, and I would either say a Garnacha or a Rioja. Jorge Ordonez, who's a pretty well-renowned importer,
Totally.
has a number of wines in that $15 to $20 range that are all spectacular.
So
And-
go
and
by
I'm not-
just
and I-
the importer name. Or
and I have
yeah.
and I have no financial ties to Jorge Ordonez.
Love that.
Is it my?
Please.
I'm going for a local friend producer. It's Unturned Stone, the Fall and Recover. It's a Eastern Mendocino mixture of different varietals. It's $18 a bottle. It's readily available. You can buy it online, and it's delicious. You can actually put it in the fridge and serve it chilled, or you can drink it at cellar temp. I've even made sangria out of it.
Oh my God. And Mendocino, of course, north of you guys.
Yes, cool climate.
Great. Jeff?
I look towards the Loire Valley. Actually, there's a lot of great, Sancerre, Chenin Blanc that's inexpensive and, thirst quenching, food friendly, kind of quaffable wines. Even some of the red, like Cabernet Franc is just beautiful at not much money,
Totally, like Raffo. But what about, Sancerre Rouge from your grape, Pinot Noir, is that too light for you?
I haven't studied it that much, to be honest. I gravitate, when I think of Loire reds, I tend to think more of Cabernet Franc,
Cabernet Franc, right.
Yeah. Because it's something different, there's
Right.
not a lot of great Cabernet Franc in the world, certainly at
True.
affordable prices.
And some of the Californian ones can be really rich, whereas these have more transparency.
Acid driven, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. Second to last, and then we'll do some questions from the very illustrious audience. What is something about Sonoma, or specifically the Russian River Valley, that most people should know about but kind of don't? So, Mike.
Sure. So I love the Russian River Valley. I've worked here for the last 28 years. It's one of the larger AVAs in Sonoma County, of the 18 AVAs in Sonoma County. And a lot of people think that they know what Russian River is, but there's tremendous diversity in terms of soil, climate, topography, and also the diversity of styles. We talked a little bit about today with earlier picking, lower alcohol wines with riper wines. It's discover Russian River Valley, because there's so much depth there. That I think that a lot of consumers haven't really scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Great.
I think people should know that we're a very laid back community of, as you can tell, getting to know us on this session. We're the real deal here. We're a wine making region of very laid back people. We're very collaborative. We're not secretive with one another. And there are a lot of good haunts here. We'll get to that soon, I think.
Yeah, we need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I want everybody to know, come and visit us now. I mean, wineries are open. There's availability to be able to taste outdoors, and, come visit us. We're like all the things that Mike and Theresa said, very dynamic place and very interesting. You know, it's kind of interesting. We all know a master sommelier named Michael Jordan, and there was always one thing that he kind of always said whenever we'd speak to somms or we'd see him at events and stuff. And it's just, I mean, the diversity of the climate. You know, you've got redwood trees growing next to palm trees, growing next to oak tree. I mean, there's just the diversity of climate, and that really, I mean, like Mike was saying, I mean, just the diversity of styles as a consequence of the unique terroir and terrain. So it's a very fascinating place to explore. Yeah.
It is, and we have diverse cuisine here as well. It's casual, but you have, you know, high-end eating, but you have a lot of different types of ethnic cuisines as well.
So great springboard before I do the fifth and final power round question. So a lot of us are dreaming about visiting wine country. Tell us about whether it's high, low, or both, where we should go. And again, I don't want the foeders or however you pronounce it. I want where a true insider Russian River Valley winemaker or principal or both. Where do you go when you're a local?
I'll jump in. Make your reservations before you come out to Hog Island Oyster out on the coast. Reserve a table, bring some wine, bring some bread, bring some cheese, and eat the hell out of some oysters and enjoy the beautiful Sonoma coast.
Yeah.
By the way, when you eat the hell out of the oysters, are you using a fork or are you just slurping?
Oh, just like the wine.
Slurping all the way.
They say that's the way to do it, but half the world uses the fork. So, but I'm a slurper because I read in a foodie book, you gotta slurp. You feel a life force that way. But okay, Theresa, what were you going to say?
I'm going to say, again, the ethnic cuisine here. So two of my favorite places for eating are Sazon, which is a Peruvian restaurant. We're going to be doing a virtual dinner with them here pretty soon. And then Abyssinia is a great Ethiopian restaurant here that's fantastic. And it's the only Ethiopian restaurant that we have locally. For drinking,
spongy bread.
Yeah. For drinking, Bird in the Bottle, cocktails, or Valette in Healdsburg.
Perfect.
And food as well. Mm-hmm.
Jeff?
Yeah, for me, I mean, a lot of our William Selyem customers, I talk about this a lot when I'm doing tastings and whatnot for our William Selyem customers, but I'm a big fan of Japanese food. And one of my favorite places to go is Hana Japanese in a place called the next town down from Santa Rosa called Rohnert Park. So it's not quite in wine country, but the food is just outstanding. And Pinot Noir and sushi, if you've not had like
nugget,
a great cut of sashimi, you know, some otoro, some chutoro, something like that, is pretty magical. Actually, that's one of my favorite. I go there. I'm ashamed to admit it, but weekly because it's amazing.
You have me drooling on my keyboard as you're describing that. Okay, fifth and final question, and then because this is such a large and great audience and such great wine people with us, we're going to go a little bit longer than normal. But final question, one desert island wine, which of your wines, any vintage, would you take with you to your desert island?
Great question. So I'm assuming that this is a desert island surrounded by fishable waters.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So sushi is going to be on the menu, and I would select our 2018 Three Sisters Vineyard for Rossi Chardonnay to go with sushi. So it's a vineyard that Jeff and I both share, and William Selyem does an amazing job at that site as well.
Yeah, that's a great wine.
Just give us like one or two sentences more why. Just tell us.
You know, Pinot Noir is can be a great match with sushi, but you know, this is a property way out on the ocean in the Fort Ross Seaview appellation, so just a few miles from the Pacific Ocean. There's a salinity, there's a lift and intensity to Chardonnay out on the coast that's really unique. And I don't think I would not get bored with that wine. I could live with that wine for a while.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Theresa?
I'm going to go with our, well, first of all, I'm hoping that my wife will be with me on this deserted island. And so I have to have a Hallberg. So I'm going for an older Hallberg. I'm going for my first vintage at Gary Farrell. It's our 2012. We made a tiny, tiny little blend. It was an inspiration series with the black label. I have a few, enough to last me for a little while on the desert island. So that's my answer. And my cousin's on this call too, and she loves Hallberg.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, what's cool about getting back to you quickly, Mike, that Three Sisters, I mean, it's up out on the coast, up on a hilltop. I mean, it's got a real structure to it, which is so unique for Chardonnay. I think it's just a fascinating place to grow Chardonnay. But having had the fortunate opportunity to have tasted all of the vintages of the Allen Vineyard, dating back to the late 80s. And this is in recent times that I've had this wine, the 92 William Selyem Allen is a pretty magical wine. It was concentrated. It was a great growing season. I wasn't making wine then, but just reading through Bert's notes and all that sort of thing. The structure, the beauty, the perfume, all the wine was still very vibrant and fresh when I had it. And it's a remarkable feat, I think, for a wine that old to be still fresh and seemingly youthful. Absolutely one of the best wines I've ever had. Yeah.
Great to know. And write that down. This is like a stock pick, Blue Horseshoe likes indigo steel, that sort of thing. Okay. Questions from people. So
we've had some good ones.
Yeah, this is an interesting one in Q&A. Donna Diani, what's up with the wine glasses? Why isn't everyone using Pinot glasses? And what do you think about that? So you guys go.
Oh yeah, I'll take that one. It's the only glass I drink wine out of actually at home because of the volume, the ability to slosh it around and get all the aromas and that kind of thing. Whether it's even champagne, I like drinking champagne out of it as well. It's the all-purpose glass. I think there's only, maybe you don't need a champagne flute, you don't need a Bordeaux glass, all those kind of funky shapes. Definitely just, it's the only glass. Yeah.
Great. Jeffrey Thomas asks, I know we're talking Russian River, but what are the main differences between Russian River and Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir?
I'll take that one. I think that, again, getting back to the sunshine and that succulent fruit. So the Sonoma Coast, I think, is going to be, you're going to get wines that are more savory, more earthy, sometimes more structure driven, deeper, darker. And then classic Russian River, let's just use Hallberg since we have that wine today. It's going to have more of that juicy, succulent, supple fruit going for it because we have that warm, sunny intensity in addition to the cool nighttime and morning temperatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add that, Theresa, the coast has cooler daytime temperatures but warmer nighttime temperatures, and the Russian River has cold nighttime temperatures and warmer daytime temperatures, so there's a diurnal shift in temperature that tends to preserve acidity. So when you compare the two, it's not always the case that the coastal wine is going to have more acid. Sometimes the Russian River wines have more acidity. So it's an interesting comparison.
It is.
And adding on to that as well, I mean the coast, you're looking at mountaintop elevations, right, on upwards of 1,000 feet versus only a couple hundred feet in the Russian River Valley. So that has a dramatic effect on how the plants are growing, the intensity of the thickness of the skin, the intensity of the fruit profile, all those kinds of things. So they're very, in my head, I tend to use the analogy of, tea-like elements in Russian River versus more coffee-type elements and structure and richness in true Sonoma Coast wines.
Somebody asked about extraction and salinity while we're talking about that. What we mean by extraction is really just like getting all the stuffing out of the grapes during the winemaking process. bigger, more concentrated wines that have what you would think of as more dry extract, or more extracted wines, so to speak. And then salinity. Who wants to take that one?
Mike, you used it when you talked about your Chardonnay.
It's a good question. I was just talking specifically about that site. Sometimes the salinity is driven by the soils. I think of like Santorini, the Greek islands, that sometimes you get really high wines with tremendous salinity. I don't think we're talking about that level of salinity out of the coast, but very small incremental changes are subtle and perceptible.
The question was about salts, like are we getting actual sodium chloride in the wine?
I think again, it's driven by the soil. I don't think that the coastal soils tend to be really young in terms of their they're marine sedimentary soils that were underneath the ocean 3 to 5 million years ago that have been uplifted. So once you dig down through the sandy loam soils, you hit sandstone that can go 1,000 feet with some marine fossils and things like that, but not so much. It doesn't really carry the salinity in the soil because it gets leached out.
It's funny, when I was visiting the Baja, so the main wine region of Mexico, a lot of the wines I enjoyed, but they had a certain salinity to them. So you had to like that kind of salty taste in the wine, which I did. But interesting, your descriptions of that. So Warren Frankel asks, which of your wineries sell through retail channels and which wines, or through restaurants or winery direct? I know William Selyem, in the lead up to this tasting, because your wine was already sold out, there was someone who yelled at me who said, well, why would you have a tasting if the wine's already sold out? But I had to explain there are really good things to learn beyond tasting the exact wine that we're covering. But anyway, just talk a little bit about where to find your wines.
I'll jump in first. I mean, our wines were William Selyem, even from the very beginning. It's been a direct-to-consumer, sort of winery. So, I'm going to give a little plug here, but go to the website, williamselyem.com, and join the list, because that's really the only way you're going to get the wines, is buying it direct from us. And we just finished our release a few weeks ago and sold out of everything. So it's really the only way to get it.
It was the 85 Rocchielli vineyard, William Selyem, that kind of created that list, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, back in 1987, that was sort of the birth of the waiting list and the allocation system. It was 1987, but it was the 1985 Rocchioli that just created the whole monster. So
cool.
Yeah.
We have our wines are available in online retailers, some smaller local retailers around the United States. We do put our Hallberg is actually it's our only vineyard designated Pinot Noir that we put into distribution. So you should be able to find that in smaller retailers and at restaurants as well. We do a Chardonnay that's called Olivet Lane. It's from Pellegrini Vineyard. And also you can find our 2 appellation blends, which are delicious and super, super affordable. Chardonnay and Pinot Noir Russian River selections.
Good to know. Thank you.
In addition to the 8 Chardonnays and like 12 Pinots that we make that are available direct. Yeah.
And at Benovia, we sell most of the wines direct to consumer. Unfortunately, Jeff sold out, so if you want to go over to the Benovia.com website, we do still have wines for sale. So.
Gotta give it a body blow right there. Finally, last question. Let's end on a high and escapist note. I want to know, do you guys, for your harvest celebration or to commemorate the end of harvest, I know in Burgundy I've seen movies, they'll have luscious dinners for the vineyard workers and for everyone involved in the winery. Do any of you or all of you do something to celebrate the end of harvest?
Oh gosh.
Sleep.
This is
To be
You-
honest, I'm usually just dead tired by by the end of harvest. That for me, I just want to go to my sushi restaurant and gorge myself on chutoro. So I mean, in reality, I love to cook and I love to eat and I love to cook. And one of the things I do look forward to is Thanksgiving. That's always kind of a super fun holiday and family gathering where I love to cook. I mean, I cook the whole meal, do crazy stuff with turkey, open up crazy wines, and invite some of my closest friends and obviously family. So that I look forward to. Yeah.
Beautiful. Anyone else? Do you do anything to celebrate, or you're just exhausted and folding into the couch?
Usually,
Going on a short
not.
trip. Short trip's always a way to just branch out of the harvest mode and get some R&R and drink some champagne.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. All winemakers love champagne. Like that's
The bubbles.
Yeah.
really important to cleanse the palate and just for that lift we were talking about, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
There are a few beverages that you can start with early in the morning in bed and finish all the way through dinner at the end of the night. So that's one of them.
Mike, my new nickname for you is Tiny Dancer. Oh,
There we go.
Tiny dance.
Well, on that note, to all the tiny dancers and
yes.
guys, thank you so much for your generosity and your wisdom. I think we've learned a heck of a lot. So thanks again.
Cheers.
Great to be
Thanks,
here.
Mark.
Cheers.
Nice to see you
Everyone,
guys.
visit their websites. This is the creme de la creme of American wine and worldwide wine. So cheers to you guys. And
Thank you.
let's hope the virus recovery continues apace and we can do this in person soon.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. Come and visit.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you again.